Is Megan Krohn. She's the Vice President of Member Services for the Minneapolis Regional Chamber of Commerce. As such, she is responsible for engaging with the business community to better understand the challenges they face and find ways the Chamber can best support them. In her 2.5 years there, Megan has built lasting relationships with an array of communities and businesses, building bridges across our community and creating opportunities for small businesses. Prior to working at the Chamber, Megan had 15 years of nonprofit leadership experience at Youth Frontiers. She was responsible for producing high-quality events, building culture and community, and developing strategies to promote effective business operations and growth opportunities. A native of Minneapolis, Megan lived in New York City after graduating with a BA degree from Sarah Lawrence College. Her diverse background in music, theater, and public policy has helped strengthen her ability to connect with a variety of people and understand the value of collaboration, promotion of diverse voices, and being a civically engaged leader. Megan currently serves as a board member for Move Minneapolis, a transportation management organization. She's on the steering committee for Leadership Twin Cities, a 10-month civic leadership engagement program, and has been singing with local chamber groups, including, I don't know how to pronounce it.
Exultate.
I wasn't sure. Yes. For the past 20 years. You must be a pretty darn good singer. She lives in Minneapolis with her wife and 2 children. So please welcome Megan Krohn.
I'm like, did I write that? I don't remember writing all that. I sound great. Thank you so much for having me. I tend to have a loud voice, so would you prefer, I can use the microphone or not? It's up to you, and I see that. I won't veer too far from there, but what is the preference of the room?
Well, we do have, it goes on.
I'll use it.
It goes on, yeah, but Megan, that comes out too.
Yeah.
So if you want to roam and carry it, go for it.
Just carry it.
We got this. We got this.
You got it.
There we go. There we go. All right, it's nice and hot. Thank you so much for the kind and warm introduction. I've gotten to know a few of you over the past couple of years through my engagement with the Minneapolis Regional Chamber. Actually, my 3-year anniversary was just last week. Wow. So it's now been 3 years with the Chamber. Before I discuss things with the Minneapolis Regional Chamber, I've done a lot of public speaking in my life, predominantly with the previous organization, Youth Frontiers, which is geared more towards the youngins, if you will, 4th through 12th graders. But I was out there presenting in front of educators and students for a significant part of my career, delivering over 1,000 speeches in that time, just trying to remind people the goodness of treating others with respect. And the lessons that I learned there and kind of throughout my life, really, I think, it's all a stepping stone, right, towards wherever we are now in life. And before launching into activities with the Chamber, I just thought I would like to ground us, with a little bit of my own background. So as you heard in my bio, I am from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I was born and raised here. And my dad worked for the University of Minnesota in the Human Resources Department. He was the Director of Employee Relations and worked there for 35 some years. So through him, I really learned the power of seeing all sides, right? Because he was responsible for doing the negotiations with the Teamsters and the unions and trying to find that common ground. So I learned that from him. My mom, she was a director of finance for a nonprofit called Accessible Space Incorporated. They are still around today. They provide low-income housing for folks with mobility disabilities as well as brain injured. So it was started here locally. They're now nationally, I think they have 200 some properties, but it started with 7 when my mom was a part of that back in the 80s. And so through her and her leadership, a couple of things I learned. One, not to give up, because she was a executive leader in the 80s as a female, and she had to fight hard for a lot of battles for herself. So I learned the power of not giving up on yourself. But then two, just being able to recognize the humanness of people and that there's so much beyond what they first see. You know, being with her and in that work, I saw people who at first glance I might assume were unable to communicate fully, right? Because of their own brain injuries and struggles they were dealing with. But they were right there, they were present. The way that they communicated was just different than what I was used to. So these values really around just kind of respect for all, I feel like are really grounded in that upbringing from my parents. And just a level of community engagement, you know, just being connected. My dad's still on committees, he's retired, he's 80 years old, but he's still, you know, out there in community as much as he can. As mentioned, I have an arts background, which is a unique thing. I never, if you were to ask me at the age of 19 if I thought I would work at a Chamber of Commerce, I would have said, what's a Chamber of Commerce? I mean, I was really, you know, out there into theater and music. But again, I think there's a theme of community in there and learning again how to communicate through different methods. When I moved back here, which was in 2003, so I was there during 9/11, I learned a lot there, but that's a whole other talk. I got into the nonprofit leadership space. For a while, I worked with the Pillsbury United Communities at the Pillsbury House Theater, doing some outreach with local students and kids in that area of South Minneapolis. And then I worked at Youth Frontiers for 15 years up until the pandemic hit. And throughout my tenure there, I had great opportunities to participate in a number of leadership institutions, including the Shannon Leadership, which used to be housed by the Wilder Foundation, and most recently Twin Cities Leadership, which is through the Chamber. I currently live with my wife, Sarah, and our two boys, Isaac and George, respectively. That's just a little photo from our little trip to Chicago over MEA weekend. But greatest joy is having them in my life. I became a stepmom just 4 years ago, so a newer journey for me personally. So that's a little bit about who I am, which is, for me, just an interesting thread into this work, because even my friends, I have many, many dear friends from high school, they hear that I work for the Minneapolis Regional Chamber, and they're still kind of complex, like, oh, Megan, you were way into arts, you worked with kids, you know, like, what's that through line? And I say, well, it's still about community. It's still about building. It's still about seeing people, meeting them where they're at, and finding out, can we help one another move from here to the next step up? Now, whether that's a micro step or a big step, I don't know, but I have learned so much in my 3 years of the Chamber that there's so much more than maybe kind of face value to the business leaders that I meet, the elected officials that I've been exposed to and had a chance to get to know in this role. So, pivot a little bit now into the Minneapolis Regional Chamber and some of our services, because I think there's a lot of opportunity here with Rotary, with your involvement for continuing that community engagement also with the business sector. Minneapolis Regional Chamber, the vision, and this is adopted just in the last year, so this is a newer vision from our board. It is the same as the Economic Development Organization, the greater MSP, if you're familiar with that. So we went alignment with our board. We operate as a 501c6 membership organization. Said, you know what, we're not silos here. There's so many great organizations doing their part to bring economic vitality to our region. We want to make sure that we're not competitors, but we're really finding what's our lane and how can we align with other organizations. So we adapted this vision, the greater MSP already had, and decided to come alongside and are encouraging other organizations that are of similar ilk to potentially do the same. So we want to lead the world in inclusive economic growth by welcoming all, empowering talent, and igniting innovation. So I'm going to lean into a little bit how we do that. To bring it down a little bit further though, the mission really then is to impact our economic vitality of the region by advancing for policies and initiatives that create an inclusive and equitable environment in which businesses, employees, and communities can thrive. And what I like about this revised vision statement, or mission statement, are a couple of key words. You'll note that it's not just the businesses, it's also looking at employees. So a lot of our programs we know are around retaining great talent. How do you do that? What's the human impact on the policies, on the initiatives that you're taking? Also, that word inclusive is key too. That is a new word that was added into this. Just making sure that we're trying to be welcoming for all of the diverse communities that are in our state and our region. So that's the mission of the Chamber. Now, who do we serve? So when I came on board here, it was shortly after the merger with the Twin West Chamber, which I know Golden Valley Rotary had a connection with, many of you had connections with, and were active participants in the Twin West Chamber. My understanding is that there was in motion already in 2019 the idea to merge the western, for those of you that aren't familiar, the Twin West Chamber covered the entire kind of western suburban footprint of Minneapolis. So there was already in motion to merge with Minneapolis Regional Chamber, which at the time just covered the cities of Minneapolis, Bloomington, and Northeast Minneapolis, but it got accelerated when the pandemic hit for financial reasons. So in the fall of 2020, we merged with the Twin West region. Now this is there's just a lot of words here. You don't need to read all of that. That's just a slide. I can send it to you later if you want. Our footprint then really became inclusive of the cities of Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, Crystal, New Hope, Maple Grove, part of Osseo, Plymouth, Minnetonka, Hopkins, Golden Valley, St. Louis Park, Edina, Eden Prairie, Richfield, and then back down to Bloomington. Now, in that footprint, you'll notice there's a lot of chambers that also still exist. Wayzata has her own chamber of commerce, Eden Prairie has her own chamber, Edina has her own chamber. So we try to come alongside and recognize that we're offering different values. We often will come together at a ribbon cutting ceremony or something like that, so we don't see it as competitors, more that we offer different opportunities, different resources. We have members, so most of our members obviously are in Hennepin County, but we do draw business members from throughout the 14 counties surrounding the region. I would say after the state chamber, the Minneapolis Regional Chamber probably has the largest representation, and then the next one would be the St. Paul Area Chamber, which is kind of a similar idea, just east of the river, and we collaborate with them a lot as well. Before I started at the chamber, I, again, had this impression of like, oh, it's just a place where people meet and they have their networking groups, which we still do, right? It's an opportunity for businesses to pass out business cards and do that thing. But I had no idea the depth of resources that the chamber provided. So we have, what is this now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different tenets, 6 pillars: advocacy, workforce development, member and stakeholder programming, which is really my area of expertise, business support, technical assistance, transportation services, and then also talent pipeline management. Now, I could spend probably 20 minutes on each one of these, but nobody wants to hear any of that. It's just a lot of me yapping. So I want to just provide you with a little bit of grounding. I'm going to touch on as much of this as I can, just to do some high-level things, because again, the challenge and the great thing I think about our chamber is that we have so many resources, but how do you talk about it? What I find in my job, so my responsibilities as Vice President of Member Services, is to get to know businesses, meet them where they're at, right? Whether you're a small business, medium size, a mom and pop shop just getting off the ground, a restaurant owner, or the president of Huntington Bank, right, in our regionality. I meet with all these people, and it really is about trying to discover what are your needs, where can the chamber help support you? And it's not a one-size-fits-all, it's a potpourri of offering, which is great, there's a strength, but there's also a deficit there as well, because going out and discussing it and talking about it, I'm constantly trying to kind of pivot depending upon the conversation or the meeting that I'm engaged with. I would say though that one of the things that I think we're most known for is the relationship building throughout all of this, and in particularly when it comes to our advocacy and public policy. Want to hit heavy on this real quick because our advocacy priorities, this is where we really shine. You'll see editorials from our CEO, Jonathan Weinhagen, and one of the things I appreciate about him, it reminds me a little bit of my dad's work back in HR, is that we very intentionally do not align ourselves one political party or the other. We sometimes get labeled that way because most of the elected officials in Hennepin County, guess what? They're all in the Democratic Party, right? Most of them. We work very closely with them, but we work across the aisle with folks on the other side as well. But there's a perception sometimes that, oh, you're all like, just kind of left-leaning, when really that's kind of the outer state of Minnesota. In Minneapolis, we get the perception, oh, you're too right-leaning. So it probably means that we're doing something right, because we're probably right there in the middle, trying to bring both sides to the table. Around these 3 areas, if you can think about it like a stool, this is how one of our public policy folks talks about it, where each leg is kind of housed in housing, mobility, or talent and workforce, but then in between there, the support bars, that's where we're gonna have other things that really are interwoven throughout all this, such as public safety, right? If people can't get safely to and from work, that's gonna impact our economy. If people can't have affordable housing, if there are not wage regulations. I mean, there's just all this stuff kind of weaves in between, but really what we stand behind are empowering and creating a great talent and workforce team, opportunities for communities that have been disenfranchised, haven't had upward mobility or career opportunities. We have a couple of programs that support that. Mobility, we have an affiliate organization that is all about how we're using transportation smartly to help, because not everybody's an 8-to-5 worker, not everybody has a single vehicle occupancy car, whatever those are called, right? And we don't necessarily want that from an environmental. We're also starting to, help support like carbon credits and things like that, to make sure people can get where they need to get to. And then also that they can afford to live here, right? We want to recruit great talent. We want to foster the talent that's already here. We need to make sure that there are opportunities for people to live where they work and not have to commute from White Bear Lake to Golden Valley, just hypothetically speaking, Brian. So those are our three main buckets of advocacy. We have a lot of partnerships and affiliations. This is part of the confusion, but also the strength of the chamber. As I mentioned before, we're working with the St. Paul Area Chamber. We work with our diverse chambers, the Minnesota Black Chamber of Commerce, the Latino Chamber of Commerce. They actually office out of the same space as we do. The Minnesota Hmong Chamber of Commerce. And then other partners, like we are in downtown Minneapolis, right next door to the Minneapolis Downtown Council. Meet Minneapolis, also the Bloomington CVBG, that's not on here as well, but all of these, tourism, let's get people here, discover St. Louis Park, a lot of great relationships with all of these organizations. Internally, we also have a few affiliates. Real Time Talent is one of them, and Move Minneapolis is another. This is transportation related. This is data, workforce, pipeline management over here. And then we have a number of initiatives around wellness in the workplace, right? And we're providing programs for communities to make sure that they're creating space where their employees feel great about coming to work every day. We Belong MSP was an initiative that we took with the St. Paul area chambers and the city of St. Paul and Minneapolis around immigrant communities and providing job opportunities there. And then Elevate Futures is all about talent pipeline for reskilling or new to the workforce employees. Again, this is a lot of information. I'm going to keep going for a couple minutes and then we'll pause and take some questions, okay? If you want to dive in deeper, I have tons of handouts, more things around all these programs. Look at this, high five, doesn't that look great? But I think that in the interest of time and just not trying to get too much into the weeds here, I'm gonna call back and just step into more of the space that I love and where I feel like we thrive, which is around the community engagement. And it's starting to pull back up, especially post-pandemic, in the couple of years that I've been there, now that we're back in person more, doing a lot of listening sessions with our members, with various stakeholders, whether they are a member or not member, even groups like this, talking with many of you, trying to figure out how can we make sure that we are engaging on the local level. Because we're such a large regional chamber of commerce, we cover this whole ground. It can feel sometimes hard for member business in Bloomington, for instance. Well, I see you're in Bloomington these couple of months, but I don't see anything else on the calendar. I don't see you again until later in the fall. So you're going to hear about a couple of new initiatives we have that are really around making sure that we're showing up on the local level. We're already doing that behind the scenes, but how can we be more visible? How can we do a better job of telling that story? So a couple of things, a couple of ways to engage with us and get the most out of learning, right, is through our events. So I oversee our programs and events team. It's a mighty team of 2. They're doing great. We put on around 80 to 100 events in a year. Some of them are signature events. Those are once a year. We have an annual meeting coming up on March 8th where we'll discuss our priorities for the year and what was great from last year, those things. We have a number of professional development opportunities. We have advocacy engagement opportunities where we get face to face with our elected officials to learn more about what policies they're talking about, what's happening in chambers, what's happening in the session, and then how can the business voice be represented there. We have our networking events, our more community involved events, and of course our talent and workforce. We're doing monthly webinars around this. We have some larger events as well, trying to again create those pipelines between schools, educators, what are the business needs, what's the labor market telling us, and what are we doing to help funnel that energy. Yes, Brian.
What is the externship?
Externship, that's a great question. The educator externship actually came out of the Twin West Chamber, and we have carried that torch on and continue to grow and develop it. In the first week of August, we will work with, we have Hennepin West Consortium, and teachers and educators really from any school district can participate to come, and they're typically people in the career or counseling services at both high school and post-secondary as well. Some of our local two-year colleges, Minneapolis College, those kind of things. They will come and go to a business that will host like a half-day workshop, just exposing them to career opportunities. So for instance, last year I got to go to visit a couple of them. Luther Automotive, they have a great new program where they're trying to get folks into the trades of repairing cars. And they will help subsidize, actually, students what it costs to get certain accreditation. So it was giving an opportunity for these teachers and educators to learn about that career. I also went to Upshur Smith. They're a local pharmaceutical company in, they just relocated recently to Maple Grove, used to be Plymouth. Again, same thing. Hey, anybody can come into this entry level. Here are career pipeline opportunities. Same with our chip manufacturers. So what it is it's a day for educators to come and learn about different career paths and then take that back. The idea is back to their students. So when they're talking to them about what they could do next, they have that information. Yeah. So lots of opportunities to engage here. The new ones that I want to really highlight here, because honestly, these Business Connection series is a revamp of some of the great work that was already happening right here in Golden Valley. So the Business Council meetings, which you all, many of you have been a part of for a long time. Gary, I remember my very first one still and meeting you right downstairs here in this building. They were a partnership with Rotary, the old Twin West Chamber of Commerce, and City of Golden Valley, and there was one in St. Louis Park as well, to have a monthly meeting to just check in kind of what's happening local, have those updates for the business community. We, in the last year, in sitting at these in St. Louis Park, and have had these conversations with many of you, recognize that there's something there that's great, but how can we enliven it? How can we get more people here? And how can we replicate this in our other communities throughout our region? Take what's good and double down on it. So this year, instead of our kind of typical networking events, you know, where it's like, oh, I'm gonna meet for a happy hour at this random location or that random location that may or may not be close to you or convenient for you, we are taking these business connections, rebranded them, instead of a business council, because we heard some feedback that some people thought that was something like, oh, I'm not a part of it, I don't know if I can attend. Making it free, available to the public, whether you're a member of the chamber or not. We just want to provide access and opportunity for businesses of all sizes to connect with their local governments. So we are doing these business connections in the cities of Golden Valley and St. Louis Park, as we had, as well as Maple Grove, Plymouth, Northeast Minneapolis, Bloomington, Minnetonka, and I'm sure I'm forgetting Hopkins, there it is. 8 different regions. So you don't have to be a resident of Golden Valley or one of them or not, but this is our schedule for this year. Prism, our friends here, are gonna be hosting us for the second half of the year, which we're super excited about. We had our first one earlier this month at MRA. A few of you were there. Thank you for participating. That was in conjunction with St. Louis Park, just because of the schedule and timing. But every other month then we will also be in St. Louis Park because these communities are so close. Same idea with Minnetonka, or with Hopkins and Minnetonka, and then Plymouth and Maple Grove. They'll be every other month with one another. You can learn more by going to mplschamber.com/calendar. But these are great events that we would love to have your participation in and at. Again, it's updates from local city, updates from your chamber, trying to make sure that we know what's happening in our own backyard. So that's pretty much, I have some other slides I could go on around promoting your business and investment opportunities, but I think the main thing that I want to get across is that this chamber, though it is a large regional chamber, we are trying as best we can, and our small and mighty team, there's only like 21 of us there that represent this entire region, to do what we can to show up in community. So I value your feedback, I value your thoughts, and I just appreciate the time to get to know you all a little bit better here today and be here and chat. So with that, are there any questions or thoughts, comments, fun facts, anything you got? I'm not afraid. Because I shared a lot of information. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's, when you're looking at your different leadership initiatives,
Yes.
is that for adults solely then? Is that the idea?
Yes, we do have though. We have a scholarship program, kind of legacied in from Twin West for Western suburban schools here as well. So I can share information about that. We have a program with Bloomington with their public schools. We do a Bloomington Future Leaders program. So we work with students from Kennedy and Jefferson high schools and do 2 kind of workshops with them throughout the year. And then we also have a scholarship program. And then we also have a connection with Edison High School in Northeast Minneapolis. So there's a couple of legacies in programs with schools, but our leadership Twin Cities and those programs are specific for adults. The only programming that we do for students is with Bloomington, but we do have scholarships. So, yes.
In the talent and workforce side of things, is there any effort to address the fact that Minnesota Nice is pretty superficial and it really isn't all that welcoming?
Yeah, I don't know if that. Yes, and we.
Sorry.
No. You're fine. What's the president of NPR? Drew Duchesne. Is that how you pronounce his last name? I always forget how to pronounce his last name. He actually does a great talk on this, and he has come and spoken at some of our leadership Twin Cities around just that issue. Particularly if you're a person of color coming into the state of Minnesota. But I've experienced this with anybody I've met from out of state. It's like, right? Oh, hi, nice to meet
I've
you.
been here forever, and
Right, and still that outsider feeling. So that conversation is definitely happening because when it comes to retention of talent, especially in our larger employers, there is that awareness. So what we're seeing is there's a lot more, but this is again like who has access and availability because the larger companies, right, are able to invest a little bit more in employee resource groups, right? So you can find your affiliate groups like, my wife works for Blue Cross of Minnesota right now. They have so many, here's a volunteer opportunity this day, you can be part of this group this day. Those larger employers have that already, but I think it's getting down more to the micro of our mid-sized businesses. That conversation is not anything that we specifically advocate for, but it comes up kind of organically in a lot of our programming. So, yes, and yeah, absolutely. And in fact, and particularly looking at, at immigrant groups, right? Like there's a great working population. You hear good stories like down in Worthington, right? Southwestern part of the state. I had a chance to work there actually through Youth Frontiers as well, years ago too. And I was so impressed with how that community, though it was hard struggle, right? It's an old farming community, but they have a large diverse Southeast Asian, East African, and Latino populations. And they have, their meat processing plants. There's a couple of more manufacturing type job sectors there. But they have found a way to thrive and really engage that community and share with the people that have been there beforehand, hey, actually this is good. This is good for you. We all do better when we all do better. The old Paul Wellstone, not to get political, but I love that quote. That mindset. So I do see some communities embracing that. As a chamber, one of the initiatives we did in the last few years, the We Belong MSP, was all grounded in that, making sure that we're providing opportunities and educating workforce and the folks that are in the hiring positions how to look past like what's on a resume. Like we're doing a whole initiative right now on skills-based hiring, trying to encourage people to, do you really need this degree, right? And if not, what are some other skills that you could list instead? Or are there opportunities you could hire somebody and take them from point A to point B to get them the accreditation that they need? So, yeah. Yes.
Megan, I'm curious what nuggets you learned from working with children all those years in Youth Frontiers.
Yes.
And how did that help you or not help you with working with business people?
Well, so I had an interesting trajectory there. So when I started, I was like young whippersnapper. And it made sense to me because I had the theater background, I had music background, and I had done a lot of youth. I worked at a music camp, was at South Pearlman for 9 years. Anybody? I just dropped that. So I had a lot of youth work experience. So I started out as a facilitator, just out there on the road, 110 workshops a year, during the school year. But I quickly moved into more management positions. So probably for the last half of my career there, I was working more with adults actually. And so what I would do is I would go in, very similar to this job, meet with a school community and find out what's keeping you up at night. What are the struggles you're seeing in your own school community? What's the culture like? How can we come in and help? So that skill set of just being able to listen and then inform how we're adapting our language definitely has impacted my ability in terms of membership outreach, right, and community engagement. Just being able to listen and trying to then bring back to our fellow leaders here at the chamber and say, hey, here's what I'm hearing out in community. So, yeah, that translates pretty well. Yeah, I know, but on paper it doesn't look like it. It's a very interesting resume that I try to make sense.
Yeah, I just imagine that it would, you have to be really on your game or really flexible when you're working with kids.
Sure, you get that 100%.
So
Yes.
It probably informs a lot of good things. Going
Yeah,
forward.
and I think that every day is a new day in a new community. You know, that was the great thing. Instead of, I did try working in a school. I was a substitute teacher. I literally lasted 3 days, and I was like, this is not for me. Every day was going into a new community and learning about them, and that's the same thing here, right? So you do have to kind of stay on your toes because you never know exactly what you're going to get. You might see similar themes, right? But the nuance, definitely being able to be flexible there.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak and gather on. I have a number of business cards, so I will leave them out. I'll go grab them from my bag. So